Hey everybody, it's Sean from Avid American Vets in Defense of Democracy. Welcome to the podcast. It's been a while since I've done one of these things, and it's nice to be back sitting in the seat. I've been doing other projects, so kind of took me away from the podcast for a while, but I miss sitting in the seat and talking to people. So today I've got a great guest. I've got Ryan Cooper with me today. He's a senior editor at the American Prospect and author of How Are You Going to Pay for That? Smart Answers to the Dumbest Question in Politics. Wow. So is that still the dumbest question? That you wrote that a couple years ago. So I mean, things have gotten a lot dumber since then, but
Yeah, there was excusable hyperbole, I think, in 2022 when that came out, and now it's just not even close to correct.
okay, so we've gotten, yeah, they're dumber things, but that's okay. Anyway, great book. It sounds interesting. Go pick it up, local bookstore, and check it out. Um, Sounds very interesting. So he was also previously a national correspondent for The Week. His work has appeared in The Nation, The New Republic, and Current Affairs. And he's also writing for a series called Aftermath for the American Prospect, which caught my eye. Aftermath explores the economic consequences of the war. And Ryan wrote a really good article, excellent article. I think that was like last week at some point, entitled "Something's Gonna Snap," where he kind of just unpacked some of these kind of stress points and shortages and all of the kind of fallout that we're facing because of the war in Iran that's coming down the pipe potentially. So I thought it was a great article, and I reached out. I want to have him on, and he graciously agreed to come on. So Ryan, thank you so much for coming on to the Avid podcast.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so just before we delve into a couple questions here that I have for you, let's just set the scene really quick. The U.S. Well, the war has been going on for 100 plus days. The war in Iran. The U.S. has been negotiating with Iran for a couple months now, over 2 months. And as anyone who's been kind of following the war knows, Trump's continuously been saying that we're on the cusp of a deal, we're almost there. Yet clashes continue, as we saw a couple days ago between Israel and Iran. And I've been cut by my count. There have been like about seven major skirmishes in the last month or so, a little more than a month. And many of these include the U.S. military striking Iran and kind of these tit for tat attacks going back and forth between the two. So the war, to me, my assessment, is nowhere near being over, even though we're kind of in this lower intensity period right now. And bottom line, Strait of Hormuz remains closed. There's a trickle of shipping going through there, but nothing near the 100 plus vessels that were transiting the strait prior to February 28th. So that leaves us with some very serious economic fallout. And in the last several weeks, you've seen like numerous analyses. Energy companies have put some of these out, academics, basically saying all the same thing, though they vary a little bit, but saying that, look, we're heading into a price crunch. Oil reserves are running out. This is like a mathematic thing. It's like, within the next couple months, so the different timetables, but it's looking like once the strategic oil reserves start running low across the world, we're going to be really heading for some potentially severe price shocks across the global economy. So Ryan wrote on this, and I thought it was very interesting. He unpacked a lot of information. It was a really detailed article, so I wanted to ask him some questions on his article. So, just to start, Ryan, there have been numerous analyses, as I mentioned, concluding that once global oil reserves run out, a severe price shock is going to hit businesses and consumers in the US and across the globe. What's your take on I mean, as I said, various timetables, but what's your take on when this potentially could hit US consumers and how severe of a shock could we be looking at?
It's tough to say with any sort of confidence because there's a lot of unknowns. Among them, it's sort of important to emphasize that the shock is already hitting American consumers pretty hard, and it's already hitting Asian consumers very hard. They're already doing rationing schemes in Thailand and Malaysia. You can only drive on like every other day if you have a gas powered car. turning the thermostat up, that sort of thing. The big
Mm.
question mark is what is going on with China. China has dramatically cut its imports of oil. China was previously the largest oil importer in the world. They cut their imports by about 50%. They also have the largest strategic oil reserve in the world, 1.4 billion barrels, depending on how you count. And nobody knows what's happening with that.
You
Uh,
mentioned they don't release their data on that, right? Is that
they don't
correct? They keep it to
publish.
themselves.
It's and that includes a bunch of different type because there's like a official national strategic reserve, and then there's like various other ones for commercial entities and regional ones. But they don't publish figures on it. It's a secretive country. I
Yeah.
think it's fair to say. And so, nobody knows what is going on with that. They have deflected a whole lot of the punch for the world there because if they had continued to consume at the same level like basically the United States and Europe have done, the price pressure would be very, very bad. But my sort of guess is that with the way that storages are down, 25 to 40%, something like that. All the oil tankers and the commercial facilities that were filled up before the war, those are down by a similar quantity. And so once there's no more slack left in the system, the only way for the markets to clear is for the price to go up such that roughly 10 to 20% of global oil consumption, consumers can no longer afford to buy it anymore.
Mm.
And that the oil traders, the oil market experts say that's probably like $150 a barrel plus. And that would probably start to happen, maybe wouldn't happen all at once, but it would sort of start to happen within the next like 4 to 6 weeks, something like that.
That's right. That's like right in the peak driving season too in the United States, right?
Yeah, yeah. The really great how we've, orchestrated our entire society around an energy source where it's constantly being burned up, and you have to go over to Pennsylvania or Saudi Arabia to get more of it and transport it across the country and burn it up some more. It's
Well,
just great.
I live in Florida, and nothing against Florida. I don't like falling in this red and blue state. I mean, there's something to that, but it is funny having come here from Northern Virginia. You see a lot of big trucks. People love them driving their big. And once this thing all hit, you're just like, wow, man, I wouldn't want to own that truck or have to fill it up at the pump. But anyway,
Yeah, that's in 20. I mean, this is another thing, as I get into in the article, a big reason why we haven't had a really shattering, energy crunch that, in global recession is the energy transition. For 15 years, China's been going ham. If listeners know what that means, they can look it up. Don't know what that means, they can look it up. But just immense investment in renewable energy and EV.
yeah.
And that
Hmm.
has really taken a lot of the sting out of this. And, I experienced this personally in 2024. I talked my wife into going electric. And in 25, when they passed the big, beautiful bill that repealed all of the Joe Biden's energy tax credits, I got a whole bunch of solar panels and batteries. And basically, since I've gotten those, I mean, I haven't even put them all up yet, but I no longer have to even charge my car off the grid. I don't drive all that much, maybe like 3 to 4 thousand miles a year. But I don't even. It's all. It's not free, but I already paid
Yeah,
for all of it, and so
I
the
know.
I'm fully protected for the most part from price shocks, even in my power bill. And like this feels great. I'm like a prepper for liberals. And
And
that is happening all across the world. The transition is not like some future thing. It is happening right now at speed. And the place where it matters, which is Asia, in China, in Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, all these places are going crazy towards fully renewable electrification, EVs, green industry as fast as they can. And
And
thanks Donald
China's
Trump.
way ahead on this because we just completely, I mean, we just when Trump administration came in twice now, two Trump administrations, we just stopped doing it, right? Like just we're not, this is a Biden thing and we're just gonna like pull the plug, so to speak, no pun intended. We're just gonna stop like supporting
Yeah.
hybrids or like green energy type initiatives.
Yeah, the under Biden, I mean, China has always been way ahead of everyone else.
Yeah.
They have been they're becoming the workshop of the world for green tech, and this is what's going to drive the 21st century economy probably. As we replace everything, all the industry that burns fossil fuels with electrified versions. Yeah, in his first term, there were some incipient steps of this, particularly among the big three automakers. They had been taking steps towards electrification under the Obama administration, and Trump, kicked them in the gonads, and they stopped doing that, and it put them way on the back foot, gave China invaluable marching like space to get a head start. And then Joe Biden tried to do the same thing again on a much, much larger scale with the Inflation Reduction Act, $1 trillion climate bill. And we are finally getting a piece of the, technologies of the future, the industries of the future. Not a very big piece, if we had started 30 years ago, and it was obviously the correct move. But, at least like a decent slice of it. It was not that insubstantial in just like 2 years, America became self-sufficient in solar cell module production.
Mm,
It's the type of thing where if you really catalyze the industry, it can start taking off pretty quickly. The battery industry went from nothing, basically just a tiny little thing for, like consumer electronics, to like grid scale batteries, massive, enormous battery investment. It like doubled and doubled and doubled again under Biden. And it's
mm,
continuing to go up, by the way. That's the one part of the Inflation Reduction Act that Trump didn't repeal was the battery subsidies. So those are still going in like crazy. And Trump's only slowed it down a little bit because that's the important thing to emphasize again, not just with the security concerns with the Strait of Hormuz, but that renewables are now they win on price. They beat gas on price. They beat coal by a lot, and they beat
mm,
natural gas now, solar plus batteries in most of the world, as well as providing an invaluable security buffer against price shocks caused by crazy wars of aggression for no reason in the Middle East because nobody
mm.
can blockade the sun. Um, or at least outside of comic book supervillain stuff. Maybe Elon Musk will try to do that. I don't know. But yeah, it's we really are an international laggard. The American century of American humiliation. They're calling it. But where most of the people live in Asia, it's we've really accelerated things thanks to Donald Trump's enormous carbon tax that he passed
Mm.
by attacking Iran out of nowhere.
Yeah. So you mentioned Asia. Any other regions that are going to be potential? I mean, saw I'm watching some of the fallout. There's been some protests in some African countries that are it's just basically it's the third world countries that are hit the hardest with
Oh yeah.
something like this. And then also Europe's going to be I mean, there's indications that Europe this could be something that really, I mean, I don't know if your read same as mine, but I thought Europe is facing some potential pretty strong headwinds because of this. What's your take on that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Once again, bizarrely, they were caught with their pants down as far as their natural gas reserves, which are still fairly important because that happened in 2022.
Yeah,
And
coming off the heels of the Ukraine, I mean, they were still reeling from the Ukraine war, right?
yeah, that really hit them hard. But the thing is, Europe's not going nearly as fast as China, but they are going much further towards electrification. Multiple countries in Europe are almost totally off fossil fuels. Like Norway is 99% hydro now.
Wow.
Iceland is 99% hydro and geothermal. The UK is like 40% wind, something like that. Spain is now that's like the object lesson, I think, for people because they've gone over the hump. If you're still in a situation the way the energy market works, the marginal cost of adding the last watt to the grid, that's what determines the overall cost, the price on the power bill, most places. And in
Mm,
most places, even with a lot of renewables, that is a peaker gas plant that are the most expensive things to operate because you only operate them for like 100 hours a year or something like depending on where you're at. But if you just keep adding that renewables in Spain, they've gotten to this place where the marginal unit of electricity most of the time is solar, and the solar is dirt cheap. And so they have been largely insulated from the electricity price shocks caused by the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And so a lot of people are looking at that going, oh, this is not green, hippy dippy, environmentalist, doing the right thing to save the planet. This is about national security brass tacks, saving
Mm.
the citizenry money on their electric bill, like the meat and potatoes of politics.
Yeah,
And
and
if
having an
they
alternate, being able to weather crises like this without having your economy implode, right? Because of high
absolutely,
fuel prices. Yeah. It's a way of
it's just
mitigating. Yeah.
yeah. The what Donald Trump doing is such a luxury thing to do, to wage war on all the offshore wind farms that Biden spent years getting through the permitting process and try to slow up all the solar installations and take away the rooftop solar and battery subsidies. Um, Only a rich country could afford to do something like that because it would cause an immediate economic crisis in a place like Egypt. Egypt's going crazy with renewables. They're just spending every last scrap of money they got on them because they have no other choice. Fossil fuel
Yeah.
imports are such a crushing burden on a poor country with an economy that's in very bad shape. And it's gotten up to the point again to where it's like, those poor countries have some money and they spend a lot of it on fuel imports most of the time, a place like
Mhm.
Ethiopia. And like, if you could just take that little bit of that money and spend them on Chinese solar panel imports, which are like, cheaper than a similarly sized piece of plywood in a lot of cases, uh,
Mm.
it just makes economic sense. And that's what's happening across Africa. It's at like Pakistan for a while was the biggest importer of Chinese solar panels in the world for a while, just because it was the grid is this just catastrophic mess. But if you're a regular person and you could just throw some solar panels on top of your tin roof shack and plug them into a little inverter that you got, and you could charge your
Allows you
phone
to
up.
charge a battery that allows you to power your whatever internet or yeah.
Yeah, yeah, your refrigerator or something. I mean, it's just makes perfect economic sense, and that's where it's at that point in the sort of transition curve where you start heading downhill, and it starts happening faster and faster and faster until you sort of
Mm.
get to the more difficult parts to replacing the all the steel foundries and stuff. But it's only a matter of time at this point.
So is there any indication that not so much the Trump administration, but maybe the energy industry in America is like kind of waking up because of this crisis and saying, look, we don't care about the politics. We need to diversify a little bit more. Or is it just kind of like crickets? Because the Trump administration would, they don't want to risk, I don't know. Are you seeing any change? There's change all
Uh,
over the world because of this, but it seems like we're just stuck in this mental model of like, well, we're an oil exporter and we've got plenty of oil and we don't care and it doesn't affect us.
Well, certainly not from like the oil companies, because
Yeah,
like
of
they're
course.
making windfall profits.
Yeah,
But this is the death knell of that entire industry, like they're getting big time profits now, but at the expense of like the next 20 years. Um,
right.
Across the rest of the economy, I mean, important to emphasize again, Trump hasn't stopped the transition even here, not even close. He slowed it down by a fair bit. But the thing about this again is not just that it's cheaper than anything that you could theoretically buy. In most of the country, it's also the only thing that you can put in realistically within the next like year.
Mm,
A natural gas turbine is one of the most difficult things to manufacture ever in history. It's
yeah.
really, really
I
hard.
read about that. It's a really big, giant piece of machinery that's going to
Yeah.
take years to tool. And that's the one in Qatar, I think, that really had extensive damage to their natural gas.
Oh yeah, the refinery in Qatar. Yeah, it was that's going to
Yeah.
take 3 to 5 years. But the actual power generation facilities, those are booked out like 6 years. And so
Wow.
it's impossible. If you need, for example, if there's a big new tech innovation called artificial intelligence that has enormous power requirements, and you need to add tons and tons and tons of power to the grid, realistically, the only way to do that within the next like 3 to 5 years is with solar, wind. and batteries. That's your only option, and it's also the
Mm,
cheapest option. And so it's still happening. It's just
yeah.
not happening nearly as fast as it probably should. I mean, not only because of Trump, it's also that the American construction and permitting process is really slow and congested, and so we really struggle to add capacity to the grid in a timely fashion, no matter what it is. But yeah, I think that in general, people are just they're stunned into like they almost can't believe that we were so foolish as to elect someone like Donald Trump, who is also way, way crazier than he was in his first term and making way more howling strategic errors. We're just sort of walking around like chickens with their heads cut off. Like, what on earth, what do we do about this? The president is a madman.
Yeah.
And people can't believe it. I think this explains, I sort of got into this in my article, oil traders being so optimistic. Oil, I checked it just the other day, it's $80.
So I was going to ask you about that. Why is that? I mean, why? Because oil traders and also, the market, the stock markets seem to be a little bit detached from reality on this whole thing. They're just going up and up and up. And why do you think the oil trading market and other financial markets don't seem, they just feel, I don't know, I guess the feeling is in these sectors that they can just kind of like power through this whole thing and it's all going to be fine. When you really look at the dynamics on the ground, it's pretty dire. I mean, I don't feel like this war is going to be ending tomorrow, and it's going to have long term kind of effects. So yeah, what's your take on all that?
Well, I mean, not being a Wall Street guy myself, I
Yeah,
could only sort of make some informed guesses, but I remember this Goldman Sachs presentation from a couple of weeks into the war where they predicted that the war would be over soon, and by June 1st, it would be fully open again. Like all the oil wells would be back to pumping at maximum speed.
yeah.
All the tankers would be going in and out.
Trump's
And
energy secretary also he came with I can't remember his name, but he came up with all kinds of crazy statements that everything's going to be turned back on tomorrow, and yeah, so maybe that fueled some of it. I don't know.
here we are, June 9th, Strait's still closed.
I
And
know.
every day that it stays closed, the longer the after effects are going to be. The more difficult it will be to turn all of the oil wells back on. That's not a trivial matter. And the more, we're talking about those reserves earlier, the longer it's going to take to fill all those back up again, because countries are logically going to want to do that. We're looking at years now of elevated oil demand potentially. And I think, yeah, it's part of it that the media, the like Axios is just every time Trump's like, or one of his officials, which is probably JD Vance or Marco Rubio, they just run to Axios and like, we got a deal's coming, and they just print that like deal is coming, like just
I read the Axios articles all the time, and I thought, wow, at first, because I'm not a media guy, I thought, wow, these guys really have some insight. And then I've heard other journalists kind of like disparaging it a little bit or talk. So, I mean, they
yeah, they
seem to be
just
parroting, kind of like parroting the administration's line. Is that the criticism?
Yeah, I mean, you have various complex sociological things happening with the Washington media. You have like the beat sweetener type stuff where they're just printing the thing so that they can keep their source.
Right.
There's just like an uncritical deference to power that
Mm.
masquerades as courage. And there's just laziness. I remember Stephen Colbert making fun of the DC press for back in 2006 at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, just insulting them viciously to their face. Oh, it's glorious to watch. A few people ever deserved it like this. But he talked about how so much coverage of the run up to the war in Iraq was just you get to the press release and you go to your computer and type it up. That's it. That's journalism. Read,
Yeah.
type, print. And that's what they do a lot of times. And I think that oil traders are misled by the people who are supposed to be really sourced up with the administration and think that, oh, yeah, they know, these people know, these top officials, they know what's going to happen. And they're lying to you. They've been lying. No matter how many times they lie over and over again, apparently it doesn't make a dent in the way that this type of journalist acts. But I think it's that itself is indicative of the broader thing, which is that in America, nobody can quite believe how badly we've stepped in it by electing Donald Trump again. It was a disastrous mistake. None of this would have been happening if Harris were in the chair right now. And it was like, we were mad at Joe Biden, price is too high, whatever. So we went with the craziest nutcase in the entire country who's messing everything up. And we
But
just
I didn't get that at the time because I know prices were not, I mean, we're coming out of a COVID, but people kept complaining about the prices of a Big Mac or something. And it just seemed, I don't know, it seemed a little bit out of whack with the actual inflation numbers. I didn't think the inflation, I mean, again, I'm not a, I'm a very middle class guy. I can afford whatever, I can adjust. And so I'm not someone who's struggling financially. So I guess those are the people who really suffer in these situations, but I just didn't understand the whole criticism against the Biden administration. Maybe it was because they just didn't get it. They seemed out of touch with people's economic concerns. I don't know. Um,
people really hate it when prices go up, I think is sort of my take. That we'd had fairly stable prices for 40 years, at least not with any
yeah, people got
dramatic
used to
spike.
it. Yeah.
And people identify as consumers in this country and in every country. It was one of the most disappointing things to come out of the Biden years, with the fact that for the first time since like the late 90s, we had a really tight labor market.
Mm,
Unemployment was really low, jobs were plentiful, and employers were having to raise wages a lot to keep up to maintain their workforce, especially at the bottom. The people who needed the raises the most were getting the
yeah,
biggest raises, and at the
we're
bottom,
benefiting.
the people working at McDonald's, the people
Mm,
working in warehouse jobs and stuff, they're having to offer 15, 16, $18 an hour for those jobs. And everyone hated that because it made the price of of servant labor more expensive. The DoorDash drivers and whatnot. But it wasn't, to complicate that a little bit. It wasn't all only that. The other factor of it, in my view, was that, during the pandemic, we had for the first time in American history, like a proper welfare state, sort of. We had a
mm,
child tax credit. We had the stimmy checks coming in. We had the super unemployment, and people would get laid off, and they would actually get like a decent amount of money. And because of the weird design, that people would get more money if they had a bad job beforehand. You get laid off
hmm
and see your income like double. Uh, and the eviction ban, all that stuff, it felt like people were being looked after. And then under Biden, which is kind of a little bit his fault, but mostly not. It was just like that was ended, and the Supreme Court struck down a lot of it, and they couldn't get it together to pass through the Democratic Congress to, um, you know, have a proper unemployment system. But all that was taken away under Biden,
mm,
and I think that made people mad too. We had a child tax credit that went to the people who need it the most, like single mothers, for the first time, and then it expired after a year, and
yeah,
that
with
was a
all the
bust.
economic ramifications for that downstream.
Hmm.
Yeah. So given all this, given what's going on with the strait and everything, so you wrote that I think you said that oil could go north of 150. Are you still thinking that that's a real possibility? Or I guess
Yeah, I
again,
mean,
hard to say, right? That just depends is the answer. It depends on how this plays out.
yeah, the um yeah, it's a wild guess, but it's got to go. In my view, again, not an expert in the oil trade, by any stretch of the imagination, but $80 is way too low to account for, and this is why the stockpiles are running down so quickly.
Mm,
Like it can't maintain that low for long. And again, open question how long China will keep its imports suppressed that much. But if they
Hmm.
start trying to like tap their immense reserves of financial resources to like get a bigger piece of the global oil trade, that's going to have shockwaves all across the world. A lot of it, a lot of it. This was the weird, thing about Trump boasting that all the oil tankers that can't get to the Strait of Hormuz, well, now they're coming over to Texas and Louisiana to load up
Yeah,
and take it to Europe. Well, what do you think that means? That means the price is going to go up here at the uh,
exactly.
domestically because they're going to be bidding against the Europeans and the Japanese and the South Koreans now. And
Yeah. So
uh,
once again, oil companies are probably really happy about that, but consumers at the pump are not so happy, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, that's why having a huge domestic oil industry isn't necessarily great because they don't care who they're selling it to. It's like a dollar's a dollar, or a euro, I suppose. Uh, but yeah, it's just not, the oil consumption previously was like 100 million barrels a day, something like that. And the Strait of Hormuz is 20% of that. Maybe like 5 million is getting out over that pipeline across Saudi Arabia to
Hmm.
Yanbu, where the
Hmm.
tankers can load up and exit via the Bab al-Mandab Strait, though Iran's threatened to close that one
That's
too.
yeah. We're gonna have to wait and see on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, if Donald Trump does another, bombs another girls' school in Tehran, ew. But it's just not feasible for the price to be $80 if we're like, we've lost 15% of the global oil consumption. It's going to have to go way higher than that, in my view. And I think 150 is kind of the bare minimum. I think it would not, especially if the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is closed. It could be more than 200. Um,
Yeah.
you got
And there's
the
all kinds of knock-on effects to that in the region. I know the Bab el-Mandeb Strait closes down, then that affects Egypt because that affects their traffic going through the Suez Canal and there's all kinds of knock-on effects. So that would be, I mean, yeah, that would be really bad. And I don't see what this, if the Houthis again resume kind of attacking shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb, I think that would be pretty bad
Yeah. Yeah,
scenario.
and we've got the already the military is being run ragged out there. Those poor guys on the Gerald Ford carrier with their laundry caught fire. And they're on the longest expedition since Vietnam War,
Yeah.
continuous sailing. These aircraft carriers, they wear out like anything else if you use it really hard, and now it's going to have to go and get extensive, repairs and maintenance. And then we're going to potentially be tasked with fighting the Houthis and the Iranians at the same time. Um, and then,
And while staying resolute on the potential for a conflict in Taiwan over Taiwan. So yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
Trump cares at all about the people of Taiwan or any of America's previous security guarantees. I mean, this is the thing that it really hasn't been digested anywhere. How America can't even be trusted now to behave in its own imperial self-interest, in the
Mm.
most cynical realpolitik, conception of it. How do we like, maintain our military authority, our system of alliances, our supply of cheap treats for our consuming population. And Trump just kicked the legs out from under all of that stuff. We invented the war crime that makes you poor. Um,
Yeah.
and it is inconceivable for a lot of like international relations scholars to see. It's like a certain assumption of rationality on the part of heads of state is kind of baked into a lot of international relations theory, when in reality, you'd be better off reading like Shakespeare or something, King Lear, the mad emperor, the syphilitic emperor. Um,
I wrote recently a piece, it's my last one, where I compared Trump to King Lear. So I guess yeah, the comparison's out there. It's not such a hard comparison to draw, I guess.
You'd be better off reading Shakespeare than like John Mearsheimer, I'd say. These guys, oh, Putin won't invade Ukraine because that'd be a really stupid thing to do. What happens? Then
Yeah, yeah.
even Trump's own generals, they were like, don't attack Iran. They'll close the Strait of Hormuz and there won't be any way to wrench it back open again, short of years long escort quest or invading a country of 90 million people, and he did it anyway. Yeah, like,
That didn't, so I wrote on that as well, and it didn't surprise me because I know that's how this guy operates.
yeah,
He goes on his gut. He doesn't listen. I mean, you can just look at how they conduct diplomacy, how, the reports that we got on the discussions prior to the war, which are supposed to be like, real in-depth discussions with America's intelligence agencies, diplomatic corps, anyone, academics, whatever, to really like parse through and understand the potential scenarios that could arise or things that could happen when you take such a drastic step. And it just that kind of like fundamental homework just doesn't seem like it was done prior to them launching this war. It was all based on kind of Trump's intuition, which is scary because, you've got a kind of a cult of personality thing going where, Trump feels like he's just this super genius who's always right and no one's going to say anything otherwise. So,
yeah, or he fires them. He, I think he in addition to Shakespeare, you can look at the classic like tin pot dictators throughout history, like
sure.
Mobutu or Idi Amin. Not to say that like only black people can be like this. Obviously not. We have Donald Trump behaving in the exact same way. But yeah, the classic, plastering his face all over everything, making these ridiculous, exaggerated boasts, always talking, demanding obeisance and groveling, obsequious, brown nosing from everyone at all times.
Just watch his cabinet meetings pretty much say it all.
Yeah,
Like I never thought I'd see anything like that in America, but
even when
yeah.
he's just passed out, they all have to pretend he's some super
No,
genius.
maybe his eyes are just open. He's just kind of resting his eyes, right?
And he can't, it's really he's such a stunted human being and a product. It's just like this is what happens when someone has been taught over and over again for their entire lives that they can never experience a negative consequence. Even attempting to overthrow the government by force, he wriggled out of that one too with the help of the conservative movement and the corrupt Supreme Court. And it's like, yeah, this is the type of person that system creates. Just a completely just degenerate buffoon who is messing everything up. And that's it. I think I wrote a piece that was like, oh, yeah, the title was like, Old Donnie Trump stepped in it this time. And this, I think, not the first consequence ever in his life. I mean, he's gotten bankrupt before, but he's always managed to squirm out of it and come be bailed out by somebody else. He was like business career was over. Oh, here comes NBC with The Apprentice, and we're going to pretend like you aren't a complete failure at business. And here we are now, and it's like Iran, frankly, has the whip hand. I don't think there's any way out of this short of like massively appeasing them somehow, and
Or which isn't really an option, really doubling down and sending and taking out the regime. Like, but that's not an option. No one's gonna. That the American people are not in the mood for any kind of a rock redo situation. That's not going to happen. So
yeah, this is why you have to build political support for, military campaigns. It matters. You ask the people for the sacrifice that war entails, even if it's a fairly modest sacrifice, as it would be for the United States, our vast economy and large population. People would still wonder, like, why am I paying for this? I didn't want to start this stupid war. The president specifically promised over and over and over again for all of 2024 that he wasn't going to start a war in the Middle East, and he went and did it. And yeah, there's no appetite for it whatsoever. Um, and yeah, so it's like to sit down at the table and say, all right, Iran, here's like $200 billion or whatever, and like, please. And also you're going to have to restrain Israel from, because that's another aspect of this that it's like Donald Trump meeting the Donald Trump of countries, Israel, that just has gotten a free ride from the United States for the last 40 years. They do whatever they want and still get free use of the United Nation, the Security Council veto that America possesses on at the United Nations Security Council. It up to and including, as we've just been learning the other day, like extensive espionage against the American government.
Yeah, saw
They're
that one.
spying. They're one of the worst. They're almost as bad as Russia as far as like putting malware on our, diplomats' devices and so on, trying to get our classified documents. And it's like, yeah, of course they behave like that because no matter how many times they do that, no matter how many times they just completely refuse to listen to the president, whether it's Obama or whether it's Trump in his first term or Joe Biden or Trump again now as he's desperately trying to squirm out of this, they just do whatever they want because the money keeps coming no matter what they do. So it's like, yeah, I don't have to listen to you. You did
Yeah,
that.
and I do think the Trump administration has given them carte blanche to just there was a
Yeah.
very I mean there's very much a change in US policy, and I think that's important to explaining where we're at today. And I know the two-state solution was, struggling and had been there for decades, but to just kind of just chuck that and just say we're just gonna just cynically back Israel. And again, I don't have any dog in this fight. I don't Israel Palestine. It's a very, very complex historical conflict, but I did not agree on the U.S. just kind of throwing all its support behind Israel and just saying whatever to the other half of the people who live in that. I mean, I thought that the two-state solution, even though it was had gone through decades of it just didn't seem to be going anywhere after a while. But I just thought that there was no real alternative to finding some kind of a solution to the two sides living side by side somehow. But anyhow, that's
Yeah.
my two
No,
cents.
there's a famous biography by William Burns. I'm spacing on the name of it. Uh, you know who that is? He was Biden's director of the CIA.
Yeah, Bill Burns. Yeah,
Bill Burns,
yeah, I know
yeah.
from my yeah,
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 and that was just a fascinating dynamic in the Biden administration, where out of the State Department, you had these just the Israel fanatics who led them to, one of them was former Bush administration guy, the Brett McGurk, just backing Israel to the hilt for the most
yeah,
part. Not to the same degree of cynicism as Trump, I guess, but at the end of the day, they got to do what they did to Gaza without really any serious pushback, including violating red lines that Biden himself set up. But then in the CIA, you had this like weird sort of actual diplomatic effort being set up by Bill Burns, who was going to Brazil and talking to the generals and Bolsonaro and saying, "You better not do a coup, or you're in trouble." And they stopped a coup in Brazil and allowed the Lula to win that election, but according to the reporting I've read. And in that book, he asked the question, based on his like extensive experience, decades doing like really serious diplomacy around the world, how come there's Hamas in the, Palestinian state in Gaza? How come there's been such support for like, basically sort of terrorism against Israel? And the answer he came up with was that there's never at any point since basically 1948 been a reason for Palestinians to believe that nonviolent, like good faith negotiations would result in a positive outcome for them.
yeah. There's no
You got to,
avenue for them.
yeah, you got to give them something a reason to like sit down at the negotiating table and come to a lasting agreement. And that's something that takes like a good degree of statesmanship and seriousness. And that's something that Trump just does not possess.
Doesn't
You know,
do.
he's,
No,
he's trying to get Israel affect Netanyahu's behavior by calling up Israeli television to complain about this. It's like, what? Do you not have like his cell phone number or something? I
crazy.
mean, it's like
Yeah.
a toddler trying to, operate a nuclear reactor or something. And it's just patently beyond his grasp to deal with this incredibly like delicate and sensitive situation where you have to placate a lot of different parties and not just sort of bust through everything, repeating it can only good happen, sometimes.
Yeah. So kind of tied to this, the November. midterms right around the corner. Well, I don't know if I'd say they're right around the corner. They're coming up. How do
coming
you
up.
think this, yeah, how do you think this is going to tie in? I'm talking back to the war now.
Yeah.
Um, you
I
think
think
this
there's a decent chance the Strait of Hormuz will still be closed in November.
and even if
Um,
it opens up, it's still the as you say, and there's a lot of, people have analyzed and written about that even if the strait were to open up tomorrow, there's still going to be things are going to be snarled and the economics, it's not like the economic situation is going to improve immediately after that. It's still, I think the economic fallout's still going to be with us in November, in other words.
yeah, absolutely. I would compare it at this point to like similar in magnitude to the supply disruptions caused by the pandemic,
Hmm.
something like that in that ballpark. And we know how long that took. That took like 4 years
Long
to
time.
be ironed out
Yeah.
fully. And so the midterms, I think, are virtually guaranteed to Democrats to win the House, even though Republicans have cheated themselves to a 4-point handicap with gerrymandering, doing
Hmm.
Jim Crow 2.0 in the South with the help of the Supreme Court. Um, and like I would say even odds to win the Senate, even.
Yeah.
Just got to tip 3 seats. If gas is $10 a gallon and every
Yeah, the
Republican
Democrats
camp,
are going to sweep if gas is $10 again. Yeah, that's pretty much a give.
but I think that what would happen in that case is that the Republicans they'll try to do a coup probably. They'll try
That's
to
my because I
steal.
mean because yeah, I just can't. People talk as though these are going to be normal elections, but I just think everything that we know about Trump and the Republicans, how far they've gone down this road of election denialism and using that to. I mean,
Every
it's
time they lose, they say
yeah.
even though it was like somehow Democrats stole the election when Trump was president in 2020, and then they failed to steal it in 2024 when Biden was president. Huh. And they
Yeah,
also failed to steal the House and the Senate election too.
yeah, it makes no
So
sense on the face of it, but
yeah,
what really scares me is they're framing it in more and more and more. They frame it in these apocalyptic or Manichaean terms that if we don't win, when you say things like that, if we don't win, that's the end. America's going to be destroyed. It's the end of America, or World
right.
War III is going to happen. And when you say things like that, that's so extreme, and it just like seems like they're setting the stage to do something very
Yeah.
extreme, and
They're
to justify extreme measures. If they a simple thing like losing an election, which was just normal politics 20 years ago. Um, anyway,
Yeah, they're whipping themselves into a frenzy, and I think that's they don't actually believe that these elections are stolen. It's just a thing
no.
that you can say to make yourself really mad. And the tell for me recently has been they're claiming it because Spencer Pratt, that reality TV numbskull who ran for mayor in Los Angeles, he got locked out of the top two, the jungle primary and the recent elections in California. And California or in Los Angeles rather, Los Angeles is a city that Kamala Harris won by 53 points. I believe it was, it's a Democratic city in a Democratic
Mm,
state, and they're
hmm.
still claiming the Democrats stole the election from Spencer Pratt because he came in third in the primary. And it's like it doesn't. If they lose, then that means that then it's cheating. And if Democrats win the midterms, I would expect to see something. Uh, it would be challenging to carry out. It's like stealing an election is a logistically complicated thing. Like it's pretty easy to be caught doing that, which is one reason why
Yeah. But
the
the
big
concerning thing
lies.
would be months on end of all these things snarled up in the courts and just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
mucking up and completely delaying our democratic process to the point where, I don't know, it would just be a bad scenario. But
Yeah. And the thing that I would, where I come down in this is that, like, according to the Constitution, the first three words of it, the people are sovereign. And I think that anyone who believes in American democracy, ratty as it was even before Trump took power and like tore it to bits, it may be necessary to, do something maybe somewhat akin to what the Ukrainians did in 2013 with Euromaidan, get like mass protests. Um,
I would hope so. I truly would hope so. If there were egregious violations and, attempts to disrupt a free and fair election, that would be the
yeah.
response.
Americans,
Um,
they've become so cynical and disillusioned about democracy because it hasn't really delivered that well. The benefits that it supposedly promised. We've had just years and years of gridlock. The system is not designed very well. Like a proportional parliament, like a proper, like New Zealand has, is obviously a better system. But you look at like what Trump's been doing, and you see this is why. This is why why democracy can be a good system, even if the system is not very good. It's so that we can get rid of people like that. We can get rid
yeah,
of awful criminals who ruin everything for everyone. It could be so much worse than Joe Biden being somewhat ineffectual in passing his child tax credit policy and not making it permanent from the start. It can be so much worse than that. They can make gas go up by 50% and take billions of dollars out of your pocket and put it into their, oil industry friend's pocket. And I think Americans, frankly, are pretty spoiled people. And we got to remember the stakes here, that it's not just going to be fine forever if we've, just stop caring about everything. Like it could get a lot worse even than it is now.
yeah, 100% agree. And that is one of my, in surveying the political landscape in America, one of my main frustrations is seeing, I don't know, it seems like there's, I don't know what, put a number on it, 20, 30% people on the left who are very concerned and mobilizing and doing, there's the 30% of the MAGA fanatics, whatever it is. And then there's all these people in the middle who just seem to have their head in the sand and not really carrying on as if like things are the same as they were 25 years ago when we're clearly in a crisis in our democracy today. And it's time for people to stand up and fight for the values they believe in. And I just don't see a lot of activity. I guess that's shouldn't be surprising that there's this sector of the population in the middle that's just kind of going about daily life. Um,
Yeah, we have exceptionally poor, I mean, this is part of our democratic problem, right? That, in a proper parliament, you would have parties that are logically organized around very specific, issues. You have your classic, like a Labor Party or Social Democratic Party. Okay, who's that for? That's for working people, trade unionists, people who need like welfare benefits, mothers, that sort of thing. We're all about taxing the rich and providing like a nice stable form of sustenance for everyone, good jobs. Then you have your conservative party. Who's that for? Business people, the business owners, just get rid of regulations, lower taxes on the rich, that sort of thing. You could have the
yeah,
Green Party, environmentalism. We're all about climate change, protecting the waterways and clean air and so on and so forth. Um, and we just don't, our parties are these huge amalgams of all those tendencies sort of like mixed together.
yeah,
And it's very confusing, I think, to a lot of people. And especially when you combine it with the fact that Congress has the House and the Senate, and sometimes those are controlled by different parties, which means passing legislation is impossible. And then the president could also be from a different party, and that makes it even more difficult. And then we have the Supreme Court, which has set itself up as this sort of basically unelected super legislature that gets to dominate everything else, and that's not in the Constitution anywhere. And so if you're like a curious sort of layperson and you try to read the founding document and been like, wait, where's that part? I see how people tune out. It's we don't have the system of educate the a system that communicates to the average voter what the stakes are, and not the mediating institutions, especially like labor unions used to be really important for this. They would communicate with their membership, being like, "Here's the stakes. Here's how you vote on this ballot initiative in a way that serves your interests. We're doing this work for you because we know you're busy. You ain't got time to read through Proposition 748 and a bunch of legalese crap that nobody can understand unless you got a law degree." No, we're gonna do that for you. We got lawyers on staff. Like
Well,
unions are
they
all
basically
gone.
tell you what to vote for this one. Like,
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you build up trust in the union. You think that the union is going to represent you accurately,
Looking
sort
out
of
for you.
a
Yeah.
trustful principle, rather than like believing some mailer, that came in. Uh, but anyways, those mediating institutions and the friendly societies of the previous generations, those are all gone. Um, but, I guess a note of hopefulness, perhaps, that if you look at, who is best at reaching previous non-voters in the last like 20, 30 years, Donald Trump is by far the person who's best at reaching people like that.
Mm,
He's got the accumulated decades of TV celebrity, just cultural omnipresence, and appeal to, frankly, stupid, ignorant people who think, oh, he was a smart businessman on the reality TV show. He seems like he should probably get, like, the fact that, what's her name? Haley Stevens, the senator from Michigan, who held
mm,
on in 2024 by the margin of people who went to the voting booth in Michigan and voted for Donald Trump and nobody else. If they had just voted straight ticket Republicans, she would have been out of there. But they didn't.
mm.
And they don't even, that's the people who decide elections in this country. It's people who don't know what the Senate is or don't care. They don't care enough to like tick a box. They only
Yeah.
know about Donald Trump being on the television. But if there's one thing that people like that know about, it's that gas prices going up. They don't like that. Nobody likes that. It's a really obvious thing. And it's really, for the
Yeah.
first time in American history, obviously the consequence of the president's action. The president pressed the button that said, make gas prices go up. And they might go up higher than they have ever been in American history. And hopefully, maybe that'll sour some people on trusting the TV carnival barker. I don't know. I hope.
I think it already is, but to a certain degree, but we'll just have to wait and see. Yeah. I do know just the one thing from talking to friends and family and just culturally, Americans look at low gas prices almost as just as if they take it for granted that it's
Yeah.
almost like they expect it. It's almost like a subsidy. And when gas prices even go up, I remember trying to explain to someone like, look, gas is a commodity. It goes up and down. It doesn't stay down permanently. It depends on what's going on in the world. And but you just run into this like people get outraged when their gas prices go up. They expect it like somehow as if it's a subsidized commodity from the US government. So like I do think that when I saw that when this whole thing kind of went down and I saw that it was going to affect gas prices, like, wow, this could be truly like the chink in the armor. We'll see. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
There are a lot of MAGA voters with giant lifted pickup trucks who are going to be hurting.
Well, then also the whole component of the JD Vance kind of sector, the veteran sector of MAGA that said, Trump had promised us he's never going to get involved in another Middle Eastern quagmire, and he just went out and did it. So there's that as well. I guess that's causing some friction within the base.
You'd have to hope, you'd think veterans, military officers, soldiers wouldn't like being just like thrown to the wolves, being, blown up and all of our hyper expensive military hardware, just being
Or
used
not only
up.
that, being used in a conflict where there's no clear like stated objective or where the objectives change every day. And like that's got to be having been in the Marine Corps and been there, done that. I just can't imagine having this whipsaw, seesaw, just like all over the place. Like luckily we don't have a lot of ground troops involved, but yeah, that's just it's the Trump way of war, I guess. We shouldn't be surprised by it, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Remember Kurt Vonnegut said once that George Bush was uses soldiers as Kurt Vonnegut, a World War II veteran, had never been used. Like it's
mhm.
used the military like toys a rich kid got for Christmas. And now it's not, it's like even worse than that. At least in the sense of like the pure senselessness of it at all
Yeah.
levels. And it's just awe-inspiring almost, I think that's what, like we've been saying, people struggle to react to them.
Yeah, it's crazy. We'll just have to wait, I guess, and see how this all plays out. But Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on today. Well, before you go, I just want to ask you last question. And I mean, you're working on anything. I know, I got you in here, I wanted to talk about the economic fall from the war. But I saw, looking at some of your other writing, you write politics, as we've been discussing, politics, all kinds of different articles. What are you looking at these days? What are you working on, if you can say?
Well, yeah, no, I'm writing a piece about tracking AI political spending. I'm writing a profile of Frederick Douglass
So
for
awesome,
our next print issue. Um,
awesome.
yeah,
I
Prospect
read his, I
Patriots.
read, what was it, the Chernow, which I have it on my bookshelf. Great
Uh-huh.
book. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a real one.
Amazing, amazing American. I don't think, I mean, again, this gets into Trump stuff, but I think he should be on one of our uh um currencies instead of
Yeah,
Trump. But I don't
yeah,
understand what, yeah, I mean,
get
I
rid
do
of Trump.
understand, but
Let's get rid of Woodrow Wilson. Put somebody else on
yeah.
there. Or no, Andrew Jackson. Yeah. But oh, and yeah, the I guess yeah, the takeaway I'm getting from that is that people had it worse. Things are bad now, but people have had it worse in American history, and they haven't given up. And Frederick Douglass is first of
Oh,
those. Imagine being a guy who escaped slavery in like 1850 and not giving up. If he didn't give up, I don't think anybody else has a right
I
to give
know. You read
up.
the stories of him coming up. I think it's a Maryland plantation, and yeah, what a tough cook. And then just it really, that book really drove home. And I mean, the institution was horrible, but when you read about some of the things these people went through, it's just eye-opening. So that's great. I look forward to reading it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. And then supposedly I have a book on social housing that I'm already overdue on, but that'll be coming up at some point.
All right. Well, I will let you get back to it since you got plenty of
Cool.
projects. But Ryan, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on. This is Ryan Cooper. He senior editor at the American Prospect, and check out his writing. Check out the Aftermath, which he's writing for. I think you'll find some very interesting articles on there. And it's been great to have you. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Oh, and one last thing, I also have my own podcast. Every white dude over 30 has to have a podcast. It's the law. But it's called Left Anchor. You can find it at leftanchor.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
There you go. And then my little plug, Avid, American Vets in Defense of Democracy. You can find all my stuff up on Substack, so please check it out. And that's it. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And thanks again to Ryan. Talk to him soon, hopefully.
All right.